Welcome to Lightworkers Guide to the Galaxy. My name is Nick Ashron, I'm your host, and this is a show about spirituality and lightworkers. Now, for those that don't know these terms, spirituality is based on one very simple principle. We are all one. We are all connected. Whatever we do affects everything else around us. And that's a pretty awesome concept. This concept is now understood in quantum science as the holographic universe. Now, a light worker is an individual that understands that we're all connected and chooses to be a positive and loving influence on the whole. So anyone can be a light worker if they feel impulse to want to make a positive difference in the world, be it as a healer or a teacher or simply by empowering others. And these are the kind of people that are the guests on my show. Now, each week I have a very loose theme for each show, and this week's show is about spirituality and nutrition, which is really important. And I have a very wonderful guest with me. Thank you, Claire Wiles.
Hi Nick,
Nice
thank
to meet
you.
you, Claire. Thanks for coming. And you are a spiritual nutritionist. Would you class yourself? Is that how you would class yourself?
Yes, I suppose I'm a naturopathic nutritionist, and that means that I work with people's whole person, their whole well-being. So we look at nutrition and we look at lots of other things. Often nutrition has to be a multifaceted approach, but of course diet can be so important in actually changing people's well-being.
Yes, the old saying, you are what you eat.
And actually it's quite interesting because yes, you are what you eat, but you're actually what you eat, what you assimilate, and sorry if anyone's eating, but what you excrete. It's all to do with what you're taking in, how well your body can process those foods, absorb the nutrients, and actually get rid of the rubbish.
Okay, so what started you on this journey? When did this journey start for you?
Well, for me, it's been since I was a very little girl. I grew up with, my dad was very interested in all things alternative. We used to go to Avebury quite often and Stonehenge. We had a hill fort, Poundbury Hill Fort in Dorchester, near to us, and Maiden Castle. And I spent all my growing up years at Poundbury. And my dad used to go and help on archaeological digs, because at that time anybody could go and help on digs, not like today. Excellent. And his vast collection of books on Egyptology and the Romans and Arthur C. Clarke. I used to read Arthur C. Clarke a lot and lie in bed as a little girl thinking, I hope I don't spontaneously human combust through the night, or that an alien doesn't come in through the bedroom and abduct me. But it made me realise, actually, from a very young age, that life isn't actually what we could generally be told how to perceive it. There was so much that we live in this multi-dimensional world that and there's so many more things we can access other than what we're told. So that was there from a very young age, and as I grew up, I suppose I've just explored more and more things. For me, it's such a pleasure to work with people, to help them to feel better. That's my great thing in life, that I feel that I'm so lucky to be able to help people feel better in many ways by the use of nutrition and other healing methods.
So, how come you didn't become an archaeologist? Where did the nutrition side come into?
I think it was, I can remember vividly as a little girl sitting on this hill fort and looking at the flowers and the plants and things that grew there, and realising that they had an energy about them, and that nature provided everything that we really needed. We just had to tap into that. So I would read things like, I had a book by Richard Mabey called Food for Free, and then went trotting off, into the woods and things to find all these things that you could use for food. We grew a lot of our own vegetables, and I think I felt the energy of natural foods. And in my 20s, I was diagnosed with something called unexplained infertility, and I'd been a lifelong vegetarian anyway. Completely changed my diet, went to be completely vegan. I'm not vegan now, but still vegetarian, and did a raw food diet for about 6 months. Completely changed the way my body functioned, and I had my 2 sons. And I thought, this is so amazing that what you eat can affect your life so much, that's what led me then to retrain in order to help other people benefit from the things that I had.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a vegan. I've been a vegan for 30, 40 years. I went vegetarian initially. And the first thing, or one of the things that I gradually came to notice, and it was very subtle, was a sense of well-being.
I think when you actually change your diet, and people will experience this quite quickly often, is a better sense of well-being. We're meant to eat seasonally. We're meant to eat slowly. It's meant to be a social, pleasurable experience. It's not meant to be on the run. Lots of things will clog up our system, and as light workers we're trying to make ourselves more accessible to light, and by your body and your cells being very congested with processed foods and fast foods, and this way that I said of eating, not eating communally with the family, that actually does shut our bodies down.
Right.
And it's interesting that you felt that very much.
Yeah.
I mean, within my clinical practice, I'm finding more and more people to be dairy intolerant, much more so. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years now, and so many more people are dairy intolerant for many reasons. You know, I think it's the way that the cattle are treated, the things that they're pumped full of, and that's transferring into us, which is quite a scary thought, really.
There have been a number of scares in the past, though, haven't they, of various things that were, injected into the animals, which had detrimental effects on people eating.
Absolutely. And I would urge people to sort of read newspaper articles with slight caution, because often people say to me, oh, it says in such and such a paper, this week I mustn't eat eggs, and next week it tells me that chocolate's really good for me, and the next week it says this and it says that. With the newspaper articles, you've always got to look at who's funded that scientific study, because they'll get the outcome that they want.
Yes.
And also, they will put in a newspaper what makes good reading.
Yeah, I mean, I became aware of that myself, because there have been, over the years, often articles where scientists say that too many vitamins is bad for you. Well, they don't tell you which scientists, and generally you'll find it's the scientists that work with the pharmaceuticals that are telling you this.
Yep, don't get me on my soapbox on this one.
No, but it's like you say, it's important that people are aware that there is that side to things.
And there's a very valid point there when we're talking about nutrients. We've just come into the fact this year, this April, of the new EU legislation.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
Yeah,
that.
hugely affecting our choice of what we can actually use for ourselves within herbal medicine and within vitamins and minerals. It's going to be very interesting times. I would urge people to go to the Alliance for Natural Health's website, look at the work of Dr. Robert Verkerk, and campaign, because the only way we can stop this happening to our detriment is to campaign and say, actually, no, we're not having it.
So
we want to use
again?
Dr. Robert Verkerk from the Alliance for Natural Health.
And how will people find that?
If they just search Alliance for Natural Health, I think the website is ANH-Europe, but if you put in Alliance for Natural Health or Robert Verkerk,
yeah, because I mean, this is obviously concerned a large number of people about this idea of natural or vitamins and herbs being incredibly restricted.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've heard stories about banning people even growing things in their own garden.
I know, it's madness,
I mean, it's
isn't
ludicrous.
it? Yeah, it's such control, and I think I'm a great believer in people actually doing what they feel is right for them, and that's what I think that you should stand up and say, no, actually, I'm not going to go along with that. I'm going to do what feels right
Absolutely.
for me. Yeah,
absolutely. And some of these things have been shown to work for donkey. They talk about the old wives' tales of this herb and that herb being good, and they do.
Yeah.
They do well.
Well, the old wives' tale of an apple a day keeps the doctor away. An apple is extremely good for the digestive system, obviously. It has anti-inflammatory qualities. So if you're looking after your digestive health, keeping inflammation down, then that is going to benefit the whole person.
Yeah.
So, these things are often based on a little bit of fact.
Absolutely.
And if we're talking about changing of diet and light workers and things like that, of course, when people change their diet for the better, it affects the liver. Now, naturopathically, the liver is the seat of all emotions. So when you change your diet, often a lot of emotional stuff will come out that has to be dealt with.
Right.
And that's why oftentimes people feel uncomfortable changing their diet, because they're not perhaps ready to face any of the emotional issues that come up.
Okay, that's interesting.
Which is where this multifaceted approach comes, of maybe seeking perhaps more spiritual guidance or counselling or hypnotherapy, or there's so many things out there people can choose to do. But but it's often a reason why people perhaps don't change their diet. And I found over the years, particularly with women, is conditioned as little girls not to maybe say what they think, or to be this good little well-behaved girl, and they tend to eat their emotions. So instead of saying to somebody, actually I'm not happy with what you're asking me to do or whatever, they'll go and have maybe a cake or chocolate or something like that. So there's all those emotional issues that come into the liver.
Food, as they say.
Yeah, that's right. And as I say, the liver being the seat of all emotions, it has to be worked with as well, which I always find it amusing when you watch things like these fly-on-the-wall TV programmes, like I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Brilliant, really. They feed everybody on rice and beans, which means that the liver is going to have a huge cleanse. That will make everybody emotional, and that will make good telly, I mean, it's all kind of stuff, really, isn't it?
Is that what they do, then?
I think so, yeah. I think that's why they do it. They might not know that that's how it works, but that is what it does.
But so what other areas, you work in the nutrition, but you work in other areas as well, don't you?
Yes, yeah, I do. I have a centre in Weymouth in Dorset, which is an alternative health centre, and a lot of what we do, as well as therapies, we have a lot of workshops and courses and things there, so that there is a local place within our area where people can come and learn more about spirituality and explore things that perhaps are happening to them. I run a spiritual development group, and it's interesting how many more people are wanting to find answers at this time. Even during the nutrition consultations, I find that things are coming up that 10 years ago wouldn't have come up. I can talk freely to people about the chakras and actually, holding energy and emotions within their solar plexus. I can talk to them about emotional freedom technique and meridians, and that we can clear some of these negative emotions by working with that. But at the centre, yes, we do lots of different things. I'm so lucky to work with so many professional, wonderful people that offer so many things. And of course, you yourself have been down and done a lovely workshop for us in your spirit guide paintings, which is really great.
Excellent, yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned about spiritual development. What are your gifts in that area?
I see myself with that particular group as very much just the facilitator of the group. My personal views is I always think, of myself as a free thinker, and that everybody must think of what is right for them and incorporate what is right for them into their life. So it's a safe space for people to say, actually, this is happening to me. What does everybody else think about that? Or I've read a book on this. What does everybody else think about that? In a really non-judgmental way, because we're all on our own spiritual path. Yeah. And we're all finding the answers for ourselves. So although we'll seek information from other people, within the group, we're looking at people to find what sits right for them.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about, being on your spiritual path. You probably come across this where people say, oh, I'm trying to become more spiritual, or I want to find what my spiritual path is. And I have to say, well, first of all, you're never not one with spirit.
No.
You're always one with spirit. So you're always spiritual. And you are your spiritual pathway.
Absolutely.
All it is about becoming aware.
Absolutely, yeah.
That you have a spiritual counterpart.
Yeah.
And then ways of expressing it and becoming it, as opposed to trying to be it.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time trying to be something you already are.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you must find this yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people have to, I think it's that experience of things, so that things become owned knowledge rather than learned knowledge. And if people are given a space in which to do that, and the information of where they can go and find out more, or go on courses or workshops, and as I said before, many more people are wanting to talk about these sorts of things than there were 10, 15 years ago, which shows that there is this planetary shift happening.
Well, exactly. I mean, I've said this many times in my show that these subjects, these spiritual subjects, and they are already mainstream the mainstream consciousness. Pick up any woman's magazine from a shelf in the store, and then be something in there, maybe about, oh, my child is psychic, or
absolutely.
I saw a spirit, or Reiki healing even. So, it's a great time in that context. Plus, there has also been a lot of seemingly scientific evidence supporting many of these understandings, isn't there?
I think that, I particularly like people like Dr. Bruce Lipton's work with working with intuition and how they're actually looking at how the cell functions in order that you can send healing out, and also Lynn McTaggart, of course. There's some really, really good scientific evidence out there now to show. Whereas, when I was younger, 40 years ago, there wasn't anything or very little information out there, and you were thought of as a bit weird and a bit different, so you would perhaps keep your mouth shut more and not discuss it, whereas now we all talk very openly about things that happen.
Which is great, definitely.
It is, isn't it?
And,
yeah.
And it's increasing more and more, and of course the whole purpose of this show is to show that there's so many people doing amazing, wonderful things in these various different areas. Now, I know you have a TV show yourself, but we're going to come back to it in a minute because we're just going to take a break. So join me in a moment after the break. Welcome back to the show, and this week's show we're talking about nutrition, spirituality and nutrition with Claire Wiles here, and now we're joined by Duncan Smith. Hello,
Hi,
Duncan.
Nick.
Thanks to join us. Because mentioned just before the break, you have a spiritual TV show in a sense, not unlike what I'm doing, the Light and Energy channel.
Yes.
And this was set up. How did this come about?
I think it started when I was looking for someone to work with to do more multimedia web type stuff. I was a web designer at the time for another company, and I was working on Claire's website for her, and when she got her new centre for that as well. And it became clear to me that she had a wealth of knowledge in what she does, and also there was the spiritual angle as well, which I was interested in too. I was interested in somebody that had a lot of knowledge on a particular subject, i.e. nutrition, something that I knew very little about, but it was also something that involved more than just a medical side of it. It was to do with the spirituality, it was to do with the growth of people.
Something that you'd already had an interest in?
Yeah, that's right, definitely, And I suppose my interest was more in general sort of paranormal type. Yeah. I wanted to get to the truth of it. I wanted to know what was what, and not just interested in believing things, but interested in, what is going on in terms of paranormal, whether it be obvious things like ghosts or UFOs, or more individual, people's own spiritual past, spiritual growth, things like spirit guides, all that kind of thing, exactly what is going on there. And that was, I suppose you could say, it was more analytical sort of side of it. And then it became obvious that we should work together, really, because I was still seeing Claire about her websites and things. And I said, well, would you like to do a TV show? I'd experimented already in TV and web video. I'd done a lot of video stuff, been professional at that, and professional photographer and things like that, and it just seemed an obvious marriage of the two. Right. And so he said, well, why don't we do it? And I needed somebody that was that was a so-called self-starter, just get on with it and do it. And now Claire pushes me to get it done. So and we have a good time. We release a show about once every 2 weeks, and we managed to keep that up for just over 6 months. And it's totally web-based at the moment.
Right.
But things might change with that onto mainstream.
And what kind of guests do you have then?
We do a wide range of shows, really. Some of them are with guests, as we've had you kindly on our show, and some of the things that we do are out actually filming at sacred sites.
That's good, yeah.
And telling people, all about things. We've worked with Peter Knight. He did a fantastic show with us from West Kennet Long Barrow. We've done a few foodie shows, so things that are really nutrition based, so that people can actually learn how to make certain things, raw foods.
Because you're going to be demonstrating.
I'm going to be demonstrating.
End,
yes, that should be entertaining. What other thing we've done? So many shows I kind of forget now.
Yeah, we've done interviews with we tried to get more into the both the spiritual side in terms of like yourself and a lady that works with crystal skulls, Rianne, and we also have interviewed Richard D. Hall, who does a show on the other channel, shall we say, that does this sort of thing, and that's Richard D. Hall on UFOs, basically. And although he does other things, obviously one of his interests is in that, and we're interested in all sorts of paranormal stuff as well. And because of the interest in the nutritional side of it, and we get a lot of good feedback from that, and it's obviously Claire's expertise, we're actually going to do what we say, and that is going to be a channel, but instead of just the one show we have on there, we're going to actually do another show which is going to be about nutrition on its own. So so every show for that will be nutrition, and then that leaves us open, and health generally, but alternative health. It's going to be a little bit political as well, because there's so many legislations and laws both in this country and particularly in the States that come through to stop alternative medical practices, and and also food, like you mentioned earlier, about people not be allowed to grow vegetables in their own gardens and things like that in the States. And we want to have a bit more platform.
Have they brought that in over there?
Yeah, in some cases they use there was a case of a woman recently that wanted to grow vegetables in her front garden.
Just
she wasn't allowed vegetables. No, it's vegetables and not allowed. And it was because of some sort of planning regulations or something. But yeah, it is.
Madness.
And she was really until there was a lot of publicity about it, particularly on the Alex Jones show and things like that it was actually thrown out in the end. But there's also raids by the FDA on raw milk farms. People aren't allowed to sell raw milk or raw foods in general. But they try and get people on things like false tax dodging charges and things like that. But they raided the whole place, took everything away, pulled all the milk down the drain, and took all the money out of the till as well. So
I think we both feel that these things should be brought to public attention, because you can't actually stand up and have your say if you don't know what's happening, and then these things aren't going to be reported within mainstream news. So
that's why we have Edge Media.
Exactly. It's so important that people are given the information, isn't it? Yeah,
and give them the opportunity.
Yeah, so our new show on nutrition and food will on the same website, obviously, but on different channel and available on iTunes and things like that. We'll be concentrating on that, and that leaves us to be a little bit more adventurous on our more spiritual side.
Well, I remember years ago, a long time ago, I hadn't long become a vegetarian, so it had to have been because I was only vegetarian for a year, and then I decided to go vegan, and I've been vegan ever since. But there's a magazine called The Vegetarian. It's probably still running.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
And someone had put together this whole concept and idea, which would have made England completely self-sufficient food-wise if everybody grew stuff in their garden. And it was thrown out.
And it's not rocket science, is it? It's what people did in the war.
Exactly.
And of course that was considered to be one of the most healthy diets, low sugar, and people were eating things that were grown naturally. You cannot beat going into your garden, picking something out. The energy and the vibration that food contains is that life force. Then
they call it the chi, don't they?
That's right. It's then absorbed into you. It's like
Absolutely.
if you could have a cake bought from a supermarket, and you could have a cake of the same ingredients that your granny made, and the love and attention and care that went into the cake your granny made would feed you so much better than the one of the same ingredients in a supermarket.
So you think that the general state of mind of the person when they're either preparing their food has a direct...
I think so. I
quite agree with you. I mean, have you seen the research by the Japanese, what's his name, on water?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Asaya, I think,
Emoto.
That's the one.
And and I think his research is fascinating, because you're changing a water molecule by word and sound.
Or intention.
And our bodies are 75% water. So if you're changing a water molecule that's frozen in a test tube, the impact that actually word, sound, intention has on our body is so obvious then, isn't
Absolutely.
it? And we all know anyway, don't we? If somebody were to be rude and aggressive to us, that has a physical impact on our body. That doesn't just affect us mentally. It can be as much an impact as if somebody had come and perhaps punched you in the stomach.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I think his work's absolutely fascinating.
And also, the implications are just immense.
They are. I think if we're talking about food generally, the fact that it's so far removed from what it should be is what is affecting us so much. Our digestive system, our small intestine, is only a little tiny narrow tube, and the gluten that's found in wheat and barley and rye is like a sticky wallpaper substance. So it's really no surprise that if people are eating a lot of that sort of food, that they will feel bloated and
Right.
uncomfortable. The digestive system just can't cope with it. And if we look at a general person's diet, what are they having for breakfast? Some kind of processed wheat-based cereal, a biscuit mid-morning, a sandwich at lunchtime, a bit of cake in the afternoon, pasta or pastry in the evening. The digestive system can't cope with it.
Right.
But of course, you know, it would suit perhaps the powers that be, whoever they are, for people to be feeling tired and lethargic all the time, because if you're tired and lethargic, you're not going to be looking at the bigger picture.
There is that. Absolutely.
And I do find, you know, again with it within clinical practice, if you want to call it that energy is the biggest thing now that people, they'll come for lots of other reasons, and I'll ask them about energy and motivation, and it's generally very low. And of course, as light workers, I think it's really important to keep our energy levels really high.
Absolutely.
And nutrients can help to do that. You know, certainly the B complex vitamins, for example, supporting the central nervous system. Many people are low in B complex vitamins because they do support the central nervous system, and we walk around in a constant state of stress with food that's lacking in them. They're water soluble, so we can't store them in the body, and it gets this vicious circle. So even something as simple as that, which is where the EU legislation will affect everything if they dumb down the levels that can be put into supplements.
Yes, yeah. I mean, years ago, I remember a friend of mine telling me that, you know, one of the best ways to knock out, you know, any kind of cold symptoms is like, I think it was 2,000, whatever it is, of vitamin C.
Yeah.
Well, they don't even allow you to have that, do
No,
they?
the new legislation that will come in, I think, is going to be 250, when therapeutically you need 1,000. But then you'll just have to buy more, that's the thing, and you'll just have to take 4 where you would have taken 1. You know, I think one of the biggest problems is the fact that the only things that are being licensed for use are things that you have to actually send a product to be licensed. So you couldn't say have vitamin C in general being licensed. It would be a particular company sending their particular product to be licensed. So the people that can afford to send things to be licensed are likely to be the ones where there may be some pharmaceutical people on the board, for perhaps, or they may not have the, dare I say it, the best quality ingredients within that product.
In the small companies like the cottage industries will go out of business.
Yeah,
They can't afford to get licensed.
One of the first things to be hit greatly is milk thistle. Now, milk thistle helps with the liver. What does that say to you, really? None of the Ayurvedic herbs to date have been given a licence. So,
Is that an area you work in, the Ayurvedic?
I know a little bit about Ayurvedic medicine and foods, particularly from the raw food point of view and the sattvic foods point of view. I think it's very interesting. Raw foods is one of my biggest interests.
Yeah, I wonder how they're getting on, because my various visits to the States, I found an awful lot of raw food restaurants. I was quite surprised.
Yeah.
They're very big on the raw foods.
Yeah, because it can be very, very tasty. When you say raw foods to people, they might automatically think that actually all you're going to do is eat the odd carrot and a bit of chopped cucumber. But there's so much more, as hopefully I'll demonstrate, you know, shortly, of things that you can make very, very easily just using raw ingredients. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to that, definitely.
Yeah.
As I mean, there are certain raw foods I like. I must say, I do like a hot meal, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, that'd be really interesting to see.
And I do think, you know, with foods, again, it is very much personal choice. People must do what sits right with them, and finding what feels right for them. There's an awful lot of books out there that tell you what to eat, but that's written from one person's perspective. You find what feels right for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And fit that in your own lifestyle. It's very difficult. You could have 2 people leading 2 totally different lifestyles. It wouldn't be appropriate for them to be eating the same thing.
Sure.
So again, it's very much down to personal choice. And thinking, I think, about what you eat, where it's sourced, where it's grown, where it's come from. You know, if you do eat meat, how are the animals transported? Do they have a good quality of
that's
life?
important, yeah.
Because if you choose to eat meat and you're eating meat that has been very stressed, that will actually go into your
energy.
into your physical body. Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, that is an important point, that the energy or the state of mind of the animal prior to its demise will have a direct effect on the person that's intaking that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. I still, even after all these years, find it so interesting that what you eat can have such a huge effect, and the nutrients and how everything functions within the body with what we eat, whereas we can be quite conditioned to think, oh, you know, it doesn't matter. I had somebody say to me once about cancer, oh, well, if you've got the cancer, you might as well eat what you like, which is so absolutely wrong to the core. And, you know, people like Chris Williams of Cancer Active, have a look at his site, find out all the things you can do to protect your body against cancer.
Who was that again?
That's Chris Williams, who has a magazine called Icon, which is found in quite a lot of or some of the hospitals, but have a look online at www.canceractive.com. A wealth of information on protecting your body from cancer and things that you can do
Through nutrition
and
right.
certain supplements and things to actually help yourself.
Absolutely.
And, you know, when we think about cancer is so common now, isn't it? It's just becoming more and more prevalent, especially for women, the estrogen-related cancer. Things we don't tend to, we're not told about the estrogens in the food chain, for example, that are going to contribute towards estrogen-related cancers. The aluminium in deodorants that are put under your arms can contribute to that. Even things like nail varnish on the toenails, that gives estrogen into the body.
Yeah.
This is the information that we should be being told.
Yeah, and I remember I hear a story in Australia where they were advocating sun creams for, sunburn and whatever, when actually they were causing cancer.
Yeah, that's right. All the chemicals that are in these lotions, and
Yeah.
of course our
We're going to have to take a quick
Okay.
break, and then obviously when we come back you'll be giving us a little raw food demonstration,
Great.
which would be great. So join us again after the break. Well, welcome back to the show where we're talking about spirituality and nutrition, and you're going to do us a nice little demo here of some raw
Yes,
food, aren't you? And
I
you're going
am.
to rope me into it here.
A little bird tells
So-
me you have a sweet tooth, Nick.
Well, okay. So what are you going to be doing here for us?
Okay, well, I'm going to make two items of raw foods. I'm going to make an apricot nut and seed gateau, and I'm also going to make a tofu dessert. So if we start with the tofu dessert. Now, Nick, do you use tofu in your cooking?
Do, yes.
Yeah. For those that may not know perhaps what tofu is, it's a soybean curd, and it comes in different forms. It can come as a very stiff sort of block of tofu, or you can have silken tofu, which is what I've got here. And obviously tofu doesn't look particularly appetising like that, does it? Often people say to me, I'd like to eat tofu, but I don't know what I would do with it. Now, tofu is a really interesting food because, or soya in general, because it's very low fat. It's also very high in what are called phytoestrogens. Now, phytoestrogens are really good for female hormones, as are lentils and chickpeas and things like that. And a lot of women do have trouble balancing their hormones. And of course, having an excess of dairy food can contribute to that because of the fact that our bodies can't cope with the estrogens that are in the cattle. They're pumped full of estrogens as well, which also upsets our hormonal balance. But it's okay for you men to eat tofu as well, so don't worry.
Oh, well,
It's very good, very high in protein. And certainly if somebody is vegetarian, they also need to look at how much protein they're having. I see a lot of people that have decided to be vegetarian and they're not eating the right foods or vegan. And they may be just living on things like cheese sandwiches, cheese jacket potatoes, that kind of thing, and not having protein. And protein is so essential. We have to have what's called all 8 essential amino acids, and they're called essential because they are essential to eat. And using tofu or soya is really good for that. Also, some of you may have used quinoa. Quinoa is a brilliant high protein grain that contains all 8 essential amino acids, so a really good way of getting protein into your diet. So all we're going to do here, this is a really, really easy dessert. So I'm going to mix, or Nick is going to mix, the tofu with some frozen fruits that have more or less thawed out. It's quite nice to leave them slightly frozen. And these are ones that you can have picked yourself during the summer and popped in your freezer so that you can use them through the winter. It's really good to have lots of berry fruits. And the phytoestrogens that they contain are incredibly good for us. So if you look at the colour of fruit and vegetables, the more variety that you have, the more that you're going to have different phytochemicals. And anything that's under what we would call the red ray is very good for energy. So if we put those sorts of things in, again, it's something that gives us a lot of energy. Let's pop that there. And we're going to sweeten this with something called agave syrup. Now, agave syrup is really a very good sweetener. It's a natural sweetener. It's low on the glycemic index. And the glycemic index is a measure of how much carbohydrates give a rise in the blood sugar level. And of course, many people have problems balancing their blood sugar level. So we want to keep things naturally low in the glycemic index, which is where things like artificial sweeteners can do so much harm. If we just mention aspartame, for example, aspartame is an artificial sweetener, and the digestion of sugars starts in your mouth. So as soon as you taste something sweet, your pancreas will start to release insulin. If you have an artificial sweetener, that can upset the insulin balance. So you're much better to have something that's a natural sweetener and low on the glycemic index. And depending on how much of a sweet tooth you have,
Very.
let's just add a bit more then. There we go. To make that nice and sweet. On the web TV show that Duncan and I do on the Light and Energy channel, you'll see lots of films of foods like this, of me making foods with recipes that you can download. So if you want to have a look at that, the website is www.thelightenergychannel.tv. So, Nick, let's see your cooking skills. What I would say is hold it nice and flat and push it right down to the bottom.
Okay.
That's right, keep it nice down to the bottom. Just for a second. That's right, and then pop that right down to the bottom again, and then turn it on again.
It's like being at the dentist. What are we doing now?
Good job. If I just give it a quick...
You do the finishing touches.
I really don't want to see this going all over your white shirt. It's important to make sure that the tofu is fully blended, which is where silken tofu is much better for this sort of thing, and also in soups. Okay. And then with our dessert, we can just decorate it with some lovely fresh strawberries. Now you can see how easy that was to make.
Yum.
2 or 3 minutes, that's all. Now when you consider perhaps if you went to a supermarket and bought a ready-made dessert, or perhaps certain types of the very low-fat yogurts, they will contain things like aspartame, lots of artificial additives, and people say, well, it just takes too long to make anything. Well, you could see how easy that was to make, and it didn't take very long at all. Nick, would you like to have a taste of that?
Oh, go on then, if I must. Oh, that's good.
Is that,
Yes.
Is that sweet enough
Reminds
for
me
you?
of the cheesecake.
Lovely, and we'll put that there for Nick to finish later. Thank you.
Right.
And then the other thing that I'm going to make is, oftentimes people will cope okay at meal times. They can find plenty to eat at meal times, but they say, well, what can I have for a snack? What can I have mid-morning or mid-afternoon that's going to give me energy and not drain my energy? So this is a particularly good recipe. It's an apricot nut and seed gateau. Again, really, really easy to make. I have to say I'm not really one for measuring anything. I think, you just pop it in and,
I like that.
and whatever dried fruit, nuts, seeds you've got to hand, pop them all in. So I'm going to start by putting in here some dried apricots, unsulfured organic apricots that have been soaked overnight just in water.
Let's hope we don't run out of time on this.
I'll be very quick. And we've also put in there some almonds and some seeds, pumpkin, sesame and sunflower seeds, and walnuts and raisins. It's really good, unless you've got a nut allergy, to incorporate nuts into your diet. A lot of people talk about the fact of good and bad fats, but we need the good fats to absorb fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E and K, so important to keep those in. Now, it's really as easy as that. So that is your apricot nut and seed gateau made. And then all you would do is pop it into a tray with some greaseproof paper.
There's one you made earlier.
Yeah, press it well down, and it just couldn't be simpler.
Oh, no. Quick.
And then we pop that in the fridge overnight, and here's one I made earlier. And this is, in the true sense of cookery programmes, this is what yours will look like when you've made it at home.
Excellent, excellent.
So I hope you've enjoyed the recipes and seen some good ideas for what you could make yourself. And thank you for your help on it, Nick.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. Sadly, time is against us.
Okay.
But thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Nick.
And as always, we finish off the show with the goddess tip from lovely Stephanie Brooks, and of course a piece of music.
My goddess tip for the day is on space clearing. Space clearing can help blow away those negative cobwebs and keep the positive energy flowing throughout your home. If you're pushed for time, here are my tips for a very speedy space clear. The first step is to set your intention and decide what you want to achieve with the space clearing. If you've had an argument, that negativity can linger in a room, so visualize your room cleansed and make that your objective. The next step is to open the windows, make sure your room is clutter-free, and play your favourite upbeat music to start changing the energy. Crystals are lovely to put around your room. Try a piece of smoky quartz for cleansing, and amethyst is lovely for healing. Tincture bells are ideal to ring around your room, and as they are small and compact, are very easy to store. The final step is to imagine your room sealed in a protective bubble of cleansing white light.
Okay, I'm finishing with this piece of music, which is called Dreaming and Floating. Floating and Dreaming. I'm dreaming. I'm floating, and I'm dreaming. I'll take you by the hand. We'll leave our footprints in the sand. How we love to fly, watching country.